Chapter 2. During the summer of 1967, Hugo Rune gave a series of lectures at the Rondo Hatton Memorial Hall in Brentford, West London. These were all recorded on film, but sadly the present whereabouts of this historic footage is unknown. Transcripts of the lectures still remain, however, and these serve as fascinating documents, demonstrating, as they do, not only Rune's undoubted genius, but his astonishing charisma and unfailing ability to hold an audience spellbound. Transcript from the Hugo Rune Lectures, Lecture 7, Universal Truths. You want 'em, I got 'em. Rune enters the crowded hall more than an hour late. He is carried slowly down the centre aisle upon a cushioned palanquin, borne upon the naked shoulders of 4 local May Queens. The acolyte Rizzler walks before, swinging a lighted censer. The applause is deafening. The palanquin is laid down before the stage. Rune is lifted carefully from it and placed upon a mound of plumped cushions. The crowd chants, "Hugo, Hugo." After a 5-minute standing ovation, Rune, who appears to have been asleep throughout, raises a hand to still the multitude. The hall falls silent. The acolyte Rizzler clears his throat to deliver the lecture. Rune snores gently. Peoples of the world, these are the words of Hugo Rune, delivered through the mouth of my amanuensis Rizzler. Upon this day I bestow my wisdom upon you, that you might become as I. So be it. Let it be said. Let me begin by explaining the universe. The universe is a very quiet, very still, light and airy kind of a place, and in order to understand it and one's place in it, one must be as the universe. Much nodding of heads. We have all endured for far too long the blatherings of scientific greybeards regarding the expanding universe. According to these learned fellows, the universe began with a violent explosion, a Big Bang. Exactly who or what triggered this titanic blast, or what exactly was going on half an hour before it went off, we are not told. Laughter. But such matters do not concern friend Greybeard. He has made up his mind that there was a Big Bang, and that is that. And further he asserts, not only is the universe expanding, due to being flung in all directions by this genetic detonation, but the space itself is also expanding. Wild laughter, hoots of derision. And do you know what I say to friend Greybeard? I say tish and tosh, an old wet fish. Applause and cries of bravo. I say this: if space is expanding, then atoms and molecules which contain space must therefore be expanding also, because if they didn't, then all solid matter would simply turn to vapour. And if everything is expanding all at the same time, then relatively speaking it must remain the same size, as there is nothing to judge the degree of its expansion against. Applause. Therefore, the cosmos must be considered in a state of perpetual stasis, the same as it has always been, forever and ever. The universe is going nowhere. It is standing still. Thunderous applause, cries of "Nice one, Hugo," and "Well spotted, that man." And standing still brings me to sitting still, which the more observant amongst you will probably have noticed I am doing now. Because, in order to be at one with the static cosmos, one must achieve a state of supreme stillness. The state is known as apathy. Gasps. The word apathy derives from the Atlantean apathy, a meaning a, path meaning path, and Y being an abbreviation of Y. Quite literally, a path to the meaning Y. But it is a hard path to follow, and few are there with courage enough to try. The apath, i.e. seeker after truth, must maintain a strict regimen. He must discipline himself to rigorously avoid any form of activity, be this mental or physical. He must be prepared to sit, for years if needs be, until he is in tune and receives enlightenment. Others must selflessly administer to his needs. Murmurs of disapproval from female members of the audience. Male cries of shh. The apath must guard against laziness. Laziness is a vile and shallow thing, practised by wicked individuals who refuse to administer to the needs of the apath. Come down hard on laziness. If detected in a wife or mother, the employment of a stout stick generally has a desired effect. Cries of shame from members of the Chiswick Towns Women's Guild, catcalls from the balcony. For one man to achieve the supreme state of cosmic consciousness, a state of absolute serenity, perfect peace and harmony, boundless knowledge and universal understanding, should this require the application of 1,000 stout sticks, I will consider it a small price to pay. Screams of "String him up! A woman's shoe is thrown!" For such a man, all things would be possible, having reached a state of at-oneness with the universe. His wisdom would be utterly profound, his word divine law, his authority unassailable. So what if it calls for the stout sticking of some idle spouse? Townswoman Guild members storm the stage, fights break out, the acolyte Rizzler is struck down by a handbag. Transcript ends. Invisible lines form the network of our existence. We move along them continually, between home and school, home and workplace, home and social board, and here and there and wherever. Some of us weave small tight webs, others span the world. What it all means is anyone's guess. Cornelius strolled along an invisible line which linked the secondary school with the Wife's Legs Cafe. It had become, of late, a quite well-trodden little line. The Wife's Legs Cafe served a moderate spread at an affordable price and had two obvious attractions to recommend it. It had become the regular haunt of hearty working men with fearsome bottom cleavage who shared an appreciation of small newspapers with big headlines, a moderate spread at an affordable price, and a well-turned pair of ankles. In fact, it had become such a money spinner that the proprietor, Mr. Rideout, the restaurateur, had opened a small chain of similar eateries. These included the sister's legs, the sister-in-law's legs, and the mother's legs, a meals-on-wheels service. Sadly, this expanding empire had fallen when he foolishly overstepped the boundary of good taste and opened the girlfriend's legs to a waiting world. He hadn't come out of the divorce too well. Cornelius found much to observe at the cafe. He had his own special seat by the window. The ex-wife, who had taken quite a shine to him, kept it reserved. When he returned to it from the telephone box outside, it was unoccupied. Cornelius ordered another bacon sandwich and a cup of tea. "Coming right up, precious," crooned the wonderful woman. Cornelius observed that the beauty spot on her right thigh resembled the Isle of Lyonesse. He wiped a peephole from the condensation on the window and viewed the world beyond. Something momentous was bound to happen soon. He just knew it. The cafe door groaned open and Tuppe waddled in. He was carrying a brown paper bag. Now Tuppe was squat. Even in the company of small people he was considered diminutive. Dwarves gazed upon Tuppe and asked, "Who's the short bloke?" Tuppe turned a fair coin impersonating babies for TV commercials, but his mind was ever upon higher things. Tuppe knew himself to be the stuff of epics. He was Cornelius Murphy's bestest friend. Spying out the unevenly crossed legs, he steered his tiny shoe towards Murphy's table. The ex-wife, bearing the tall boy's second breakfast, stepped over him, scooped up a stool and tucked it in beside Cornelius. Cornelius helped his companion onto it. "Good day, Tuppe," said he. "Good day, Cornelius," the other replied. "Is that bacon within?" Cornelius proffered his plate. "It is. Eat your fill." Tuppe took advantage of his friend's largesse. "A cup that cheers would not go amiss," he remarked. Cornelius ordered another tea. "I can promise no applause." "Always the wag." Tuppe tucked into his brekkie. "Might I inquire as to the contents of the enigmatic sack?" Cornelius indicated the bag on the tabletop. "It's a hibernating fish, held under test conditions." Cornelius steered the conversation towards another port of call. He had no particular love of fish. "The loon yarrow made another attempt to have me employed today." "A pox upon yarrow and all his works." Tuppe strained a bacon rind through the gap in his front teeth. "You drew your salary, of course?" "Of course." "Then peace be unto you." Tuppe munched on. Cornelius sipped his tea. Tuppe's arrived, and he did likewise. "Fab legs, the ex-wife," he remarked. "All the way up." Cornelius raised an eyebrow. "Sorry, pardon, but you know how it is." Cornelius did. The two understood each other completely. After a while, Tuppe asked, "How is the daddy?" "Taken to his shed." "And the mother?" "Under doctor's orders." "And what of yourself?" "Sound in wind and limb, but having an itch I am unable to scratch." "The stuff of epics business. I feel it also." "I know that you do." "I think." Tuppe pulled a converted shirt tail from his trouser pocket and dabbed his mouth with it. "That we'd best finish up here and apply ourselves to adventures elsewhere." And so they did. Above and beyond the secondary school and the Wife's Legs Cafe loomed Star Hill, filling a substantial amount of skyline and covering 6 full squares of the Ordnance Survey map. Star Hill was common land, and so its lower acres were given over to recreational pursuits. Footballs were kicked here, picnics and sports days held, litter spread. The wooded middle ground was reserved for track biking, bird nesting, and youthful fornication. Here the men in the Max played hide-and-seek with the plainclothes policewomen. The peak, some 300 feet above sea level, according to the benchmark, had a certain magic about it. The local Wiccans came up here on warm nights to dance around in their bare scuddies. Foxes fiddled in the thickets, rare orchids bloomed unseen, and the wind came always from the east. A concrete plinth, erected by the town council in 1935, marked the spot where the earthly remains of the Reverend Matthew Kemp had been interred exactly 300 years before. The Reverend had obtained the permission of the Archbishop of Canterbury to have himself buried there, at the highest point in the district, standing on his head. His reasoning being that when the clarion call is sounded on Resurrection Day and the whole world is turned upside down, he'll be the first one out and standing on his feet. The concrete plinth was surmounted by an engraved copper map of the district. Radiating spokes informed prospect viewers of the distances and directions to such exotic destinations as Nepal, Tasmania, the Nile Delta, Portugal, and Penge. The copper map had evidently been fastened to the concrete plinth through the medium of some 1930s metallurgical technology, which is sadly lost to us today, because it ruggedly defied even the most enterprising attempts to prise it free and bear it off to the smelting pot. A concrete plinth exhibited similar stoicism, having withstood the best that several generations of secondary school boys could formulate and explored against it. Both plinth and map remained inviolate. Irreverent humorists chuckled in anticipation of the Reverend Kemp's unecclesiastical language when the clarion call was sounded and he tried to dig his way out. Cornelius and Tuppe strolled up Star Hill. The invisible lines, which traced the patterns of their existence, merged into one, became a geodesic spiral engirdling the hill, terminated at the plinth, and were never mentioned again. Tuppe had travelled the latter part of the journey on the tall boy's shoulders. Cornelius lifted him down and set him upon the copper map. The burnished copper shone bravely, having only the previous night survived unscathed a particularly concerted attack upon its person. In a nearby bush, a now defunct oxyacetylene torch attracted the attention of a passing stort. The young men of epic stuff took the air. Cornelius worried at his top knot, and Tuppe kicked his tiny boot heels against the plinth and patted his brown paper bag. The world as they knew it was displayed around and about. To the north, the Grand Union Canal drew the line before the industrial estate. To the west, the commoners' fields met the highway, where the buses turned around and the shops went on parade. To the south lay a vast area of redevelopment, relieved only by the remains of a Victorian terrace, 6 houses, and one of these the Murphy residence. To the east, well-fenced and warning-hung, a sheer drop of 200 feet fell down to the golf course. Whilst being of no particular interest right now, this cliff would nevertheless have an exciting part to play somewhat later. "How is the fish?" Cornelius asked, for its proximity troubled him. Tuppe peeped into the bag. "Shush," said he. "It's dead, that fish of yours, isn't it, Tuppe?" Tuppe nodded. "By the look of it, I think so." "Then what was all that talk of hibernation and test conditions?" Tuppe winked. "Did you ever hear tell of Polga the Unprecedented?" "He of Polga's porcine circus?" "The very same. My father worked a sideshow circuit with the man years back. Polga exhibited a number of star turns. The singing sheep of Sudbury, Toby a sapient pig, Darwin the educated ape, and a grand exposition of industrious fleas. Apparently the latter was a thing of great wonder, with trained insects reenacting the siege of Rorke's Drift to considerable effect." "But he is best remembered for his porcine circus." "Indeed, he toured the rural communities with it. The pigs were schooled to scale ladders, walk tight ropes, and perform feats of prestidigitation. Stuff with the trotters. At each venue, he inevitably sold at least one of the pigs to an eager farming type." "That doesn't sound very practical." "Oh, it was. The pigs were well trained, and as Polga left town, he rang the dinner bell, and the sold pig climbed out the farmer's pen and returned to him. It went very well for a while, but eventually it cost him a term at Her Majesty's pleasure. By the time he got out, the performing pig had lost most of its charm for the paying customer." "But what about the fish?" "Polga's grandson is Peter Polga, he of Peter's Pets in the High Street." "I know of it." "And young Polga is a gentleman of wild talent, much given to the creation of the chimera." I've passed his premises on many an occasion, said Cornelius. Those beasts visible through the grimy window were all a shade too mythical for my particular taste. Quite so, and your reference to the window gives you the measure of the man. He is careful with his pennies. He's a tight-fisted bug. Quite so. And this fish in a bag is his latest accomplishment, an ungodly hybrid of a squirrel and a trout. His intention is the cuddly fish that feeds on acorns and sleeps through the winter when nobody wants to go outside and look in their fish pond anyway. He's certainly a sharp one, this Polga, but I do detect a slight flaw or two in his reasoning. You do? I do. For one thing, this is now high summer and not the hibernation season. I did mention this to him, but he said he'd pay me a fiver if I took the fish out for a bit of fresh air in the hope that it might drop off to sleep. Fish never sleep, according to him, so if this one does, then that's half the battle won as far as friend Polga is concerned. Which does rather bring me to flaw number 2. Did you care to touch upon the fact that fish rarely flourish once they are removed from water? No, I prefer to accept the fiver. I would have done the same. Shall we bury the fish, then? What, here, hardly sporting to the red room Kemp? Tuppe emptied the unnatural issue into his lap. Cornelius viewed it with distaste. Are those little feet? He asked. Seems like, and it has really horrid teeth. Do you want to see? No, thank you. As you please. Tuppe took the furry fish by its tail and sniffed it. Would there be good eating in a fish like this, do you suppose? Cornelius held down his hair and shook his head. Not in the squirrel pots. Toss the thing away, Tuppe. I have no love for fish, furred, feathered, fried, or farmed. So be it. Sorry, little fishy. Tuppe flung the aquatic anomaly over his shoulder, wiped his fingers on the paper bag, and clambered to his feet on the copper map. Cornelius put his arm around his friend's shoulder, and the two gazed off towards the lands of the east, wondering once more what the fates held in store for them. The sun cast their shadows behind them, and here occurred a curiosity, for although the two stood with their heads for once on a level pegging, the size of their shadows differed to no small degree. That of Cornelius was its usual angular self, topped off with a twirling banner, but the shadow of Tuppe extended to nearly double the length of his companion's, and even though the little fellow stood stock still, his shadow heaved and twisted as some living creature writhing in unimaginable torment. And all the birds that saw it stopped singing upon the instant, and the short hairs rose upon the neck of Cornelius Murphy, and he felt suddenly afraid. Cornelius turned with a jerk, nearly dislodging Tuppe from his precarious perch, but there was nothing for him to see. "Oh, ow!" cried Tuppe, struggling to keep his balance. "What's happening?" "I don't know." Cornelius scratched at his chin. It was going to need a shave in a month or 2. The birds. He put a hand to his ear. The birds were singing once again. Cornelius shivered. "Let's go down. It's turning cold." "Cold? Cornelius?" Tuppe shinned down from the plinth. The tall boy turned away and began to pace away down the hill. "Cornelius, wait for me!" Tuppe limped off in hot pursuit. In the long grass, where Tuppe's shadow had performed its curious gyrations, the furry fish awoke from its nap, snapped its horrid teeth, and crept away in search of a 4-legged lunch.